The sea has always been a place of mystery, a world beyond our understanding. But what if everything you've heard about the deep, the creatures lurking beneath, has been a lie? Imagine this: you're miles off the coast, surrounded by nothing but the vast, endless ocean. The water is still, almost too quiet, when suddenly the unthinkable happens. You hear something unnatural, something that no human should ever hear. It starts as a faint rumble, deep beneath the surface. Then it's louder, like a scream, but not from anything human. It's a sound so terrifying, it echoes through your bones. You weren't supposed to be there. You weren't supposed to see it. But you did. You and your team, trained for the unimaginable, are now facing something that shouldn't exist. Something ancient, something alien, and it's not alone. What do you do when you're caught between the deadly force of something that never should have been found, and the brutal silence of a government determined to bury it all? This isn't a tale from the farthest reaches of space, but from the cold, dark waters of Earth. And I'm here to tell you, the truth is worse than any monster you've imagined. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a whisper from the dark. Your support means everything and fuels our journey to uncover the unseen. Join us on Whispers in the Dark. The ocean has always been a place of mystery, but not like this, not like the whispering depths I would come to fear. No one truly understands the sea, not really. We tell ourselves we do, that we've conquered it, but that's a lie. The ocean doesn't belong to us. It never has. I should have known something was wrong the moment we were given the mission. The orders were simple: investigate, contain, and eliminate. Standard procedure for a SEAL team. No questions, no hesitation. We were trained to face the impossible, the things most people would run from. But this wasn't in any manual. No briefing, no reconnaissance. It felt different from the start. I've spent my life relying on facts, on the real, the tangible. I've seen things in the field that would have driven a lesser man insane. But I kept going. I had to. I was 34 now, a Navy SEAL for over a decade, and I had been in situations more dangerous than I care to remember. I had killed, I had bled, I had lost brothers, but this was a new kind of terror. Something that didn't belong in our world. Something primal. It all started off the coast of Santa Barbara, California, a place that had always seemed too perfect, too quiet. Fishermen there had been reporting strange occurrences for years, boats vanishing without a trace, ships drifting aimlessly, crew members gone without a fight. The military dismissed it at first, brushing it off as rogue currents or wild weather patterns. But when a marine biologist discovered a mangled body washed up on the shore, everything changed. The body wasn't human, at least not entirely. It had the limbs, the eyes, the mouth, but they were wrong. The thing was long, too long. The limbs were abnormally elongated, like they'd been stretched, contorted. The fingers were webbed, ending in sharp claws, and its skin was translucent, almost glowing in the dim light. Its face, twisted between human and something else, stared back at us with eyes that, God, I'll never forget those eyes. They were far too intelligent for something that wasn't supposed to exist. The autopsy report came back with more nightmares. This wasn't an isolated creature. It was a species. And they were multiplying. It didn't take long before we were ordered in. A team of 6. All seasoned SEALs, highly trained to handle the unimaginable. We were tasked with neutralizing the threat, making sure whatever it was stayed buried in the dark, where it belonged. The operation seemed simple enough. Find the creatures, kill them, and return home. We were wrong. The first signs were subtle at first. Little things that didn't make sense. A ripple in the water. A shadow that moved too quickly for a fish. A strange flicker of light just beneath the surface. As we descended into the abyss, the water grew colder, the silence thicker. We went deeper, and the deeper we went, the heavier the air felt in our suits. There was something down there. Something waiting for us. We found the cave system after hours of searching. At around 400 meters below the surface, the cave's walls were covered in strange, smooth markings, symbols, or perhaps something worse. The water was unnaturally still, a sickly green tint casting shadows across the jagged rocks. I felt it before I saw it. The air shifted, a low hum vibrating through the suit, through my bones. It was a sound that didn't belong, a whisper from the depths, an unnatural call. The first creature appeared like a blur, darting between the rocks with a speed I couldn't comprehend. It wasn't a fish, it wasn't a mammal, it was something else entirely. It moved like a predator, a hunter born to the dark, the very depths of the ocean where no human had ever ventured. Before I could react, it was upon us. The battle was brief, violent. The thing was too fast, too strong. We managed to kill it, but not before it let out a screech, one that reverberated through the water, rattling my teeth, sending a tremor through my very soul. That sound, high-pitched and unnatural, it wasn't just a warning. It was a call to others. And others came. We were overwhelmed in seconds. They came at us from the dark, claws outstretched, mouths gaping. There were dozens of them, maybe more, circling us, closing in. They were smarter than any animal I'd ever faced, working in unison like a pack of wolves. They flanked us, forcing us into a corner, pushing us deeper into the cave system. One by one, my team fell. It was chaos. Blood, black as the water around us, filled the cave. My brothers screamed as they were dragged into the depths, torn apart by creatures that shouldn't exist. I fought with everything I had left. My body pushed to its limits. The cold metal of my weapon felt useless against their claws, their teeth. I killed 50 of them, but it didn't matter. For every one I took down, 2 more appeared from the shadows. It was like they were endless, a relentless force of nature designed to eradicate us. When I finally surfaced, I was alone. I had survived, but at what cost? My team was gone, my brothers, torn apart by something that shouldn't exist. And the creatures, they were still out there, lurking in the dark, waiting for their moment, and I knew they wouldn't stay hidden forever. I was debriefed, but they didn't want to hear the truth. They buried the operation, classified it as a failure, said it never happened. I told them everything, but they dismissed it, sealed it away, never to see the light of day. The public would never know. No one would believe it anyway. But I knew what I had seen, what we had all seen. The truth was out there, and it was worse than any nightmare. The creatures were real, they were still out there, and they were evolving, and I can't keep quiet anymore. Before we continue, if you want to stay in the loop with more chilling stories like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Your support on Whispers in the Dark keeps us going and gives us the strength to uncover the hidden truths lurking in the shadows. Trust me, this is only the beginning. I spent days in silence after the operation, trying to forget what I'd seen, what I'd done, but it wasn't that simple. It never is. I tried to tell myself it was a nightmare, that it had all been some twisted hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. I had been in far worse situations, and yet this was different. The images of those creatures, of their eyes, glowing with an intelligence that shouldn't exist, haunted me at night. It wasn't just the monsters that troubled me. It was the knowledge that I had barely scraped the surface. There was so much more beneath the waves, so much that had been hidden for so long, buried in the deepest parts of the ocean where no one dared to go. Every night, I found myself staring out at the ocean, watching the waves break against the shore. I wanted to believe it was just another day, that everything was normal, but it wasn't. There were things out there, things that should never have been found, and they were coming. The phone call came unexpectedly one afternoon. It was from Admiral Sullivan, a name that had haunted me for years. He had been one of the higher-ups in the operation, a man whose silence was as deep as the sea itself. I didn't expect him to contact me. Not after everything that had happened. The voice on the other end was gravelly, worn with age and regret. "Hayes," he said, "we need to talk." The words sent a chill down my spine. I had a sense that this wasn't just a friendly check-in. This was something else, something far darker. I arrived at the rendezvous point near a secluded dock on the outskirts of Santa Monica. An area so remote that only a handful of locals knew about it. I parked my truck and waited, my heart racing. Every instinct screamed that I shouldn't be here, that I should turn around and never look back. But I couldn't. The truth had become an obsession. I needed to know what had happened, what was still happening. Minutes passed before a black SUV pulled into the lot. The driver was masked, his face obscured by a dark tint. He didn't speak, just gestured for me to follow him. We drove in silence for what felt like hours. The sound of the engine the only thing filling the air. It wasn't until we reached an abandoned warehouse by the water that the driver spoke. "Get out," he said. I complied, stepping into the cold, night air. My breath came out in visible clouds. The chill of the ocean settling over me like a blanket of dread. The warehouse loomed above me, its dark silhouette casting long shadows on the ground. I could feel it, the same feeling I had back in that cave in Alaska. That primal, bone-deep fear. The door to the warehouse creaked open, and I followed the driver inside. Inside, Admiral Sullivan stood, his arms crossed, staring at a map on the wall. He was an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that had seen far too much. His gray hair and the deep lines on his face told the story of someone who had witnessed horrors beyond imagination. He didn't turn when I entered, but his voice was low, steady. "You were right. What you saw, it wasn't a fluke." I swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" He finally turned, locking eyes with me. "There's more of them, worse than what you encountered. And they're moving, they're coming for us." My stomach churned. I had hoped that the horrors I saw in the depths were over, that we could move on. But I should have known better. Once you see something like that, you can never escape it. "You're telling me that these creatures, they're real? They're still out there?" Sullivan nodded slowly. "Yes, and they're not alone. We've been tracking them for years. The government knows. We've been covering it up. But we can't hide it anymore." I stepped closer, my mind racing with questions. "What do you mean? What are they? Where did they come from?" "Those creatures, they're not just some freak of nature. They're ancient. They've been around longer than us. And they're evolving." Sullivan paused, as if weighing whether or not he should say more. "They were hidden in the deep. But now, they're moving, and they're not stopping." I felt the air grow heavier around me. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We go back in," Sullivan replied, his eyes dark with a burden I could feel. "The operation isn't over. We need to find out what they want, how to stop them." And, before he could finish, the lights in the warehouse flickered, then went out. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, from the depths of the warehouse, came a sound. It was a low, guttural growl, the kind of sound that doesn't belong in the world of the living. I turned to Sullivan, my heart racing. He was already moving toward the door, his hand reaching for his gun. "Stay close," he muttered. "We need to move, now." I followed, every instinct screaming to get out of there. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet, not when I had so many questions. The growl grew louder, followed by the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, shuffling in the dark. It wasn't human, and it wasn't alone. We stepped into the shadows, trying to stay quiet, trying to stay unnoticed, but the floor beneath our feet groaned with every step, like the building itself was trying to warn us. Then, the growl turned into a screech, high-pitched and filled with raw anger. It echoed through the walls, vibrating through the ground. "Run," Sullivan barked, his voice frantic now, but it was too late. The door behind us slammed shut, and from the darkness, they emerged. The creatures. They were even worse than I'd imagined. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to stay updated on the latest videos. Your support keeps us uncovering the truth that's been hidden in the shadows for far too long. Join us, and let's face what lurks in the dark together. The screech echoed in my ears, so shrill it felt like my very soul was vibrating with fear. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, heart pounding so violently I thought it would burst from my chest. Sullivan's command to run barely registered in my brain as my mind tried to process the sounds, the sickening, scraping noises that filled the air. They're coming. I didn't need to see them to know they were near. The air had grown heavier, more oppressive, as if the darkness itself had weight. The warehouse, once just a place of shadowed concrete and rusted machinery, had transformed into something else entirely. Something alive, something that knew we were there. The screech came again, this time louder, accompanied by the sound of something large moving swiftly through the darkness. I could hear claws scraping against the metal floor, dragging like a predator's hunt, seeking out its prey. In the dim light from our flashlights, I saw them. First, it was only a flicker, a shadow darting past the beams of our torches. Then, another. The creatures were moving faster than any human could, their long limbs skimming the floor like grotesque spiders. And there, in the middle of the room, a form stood still, its eyes gleaming like twin orbs of sickly green. It stared at us, unblinking, its features twisted, half human, half nightmarish. Its limbs stretched unnaturally, long and jagged, like they'd been stretched too far. The skin was translucent, an ethereal glow emanating from within. But it wasn't the physical form that sent the chill down my spine. It was its eyes, those eyes. They were too intelligent, too knowing. They looked at us as if they understood what we were thinking. And in that moment, I realized the horror of what we had stumbled upon. Sullivan cursed under his breath, reaching for his weapon. "Stay quiet, stay together," he hissed, his voice tight with anxiety. I could hear him, but my thoughts were already spiraling. What were these things? How had they survived all this time? The government had to know about them, had to. There was no way they could have kept something this monstrous hidden for this long. The creature began to move again, its movements eerie in the silence. It didn't walk, it glided, like it wasn't bound by the limitations of the physical world. One moment it was in the corner of the room, and the next, it was 10 feet closer, its clawed fingers scraping along the concrete, leaving dark streaks behind. I barely had time to react before it lunged. In a flash of instinct, I ducked, but it wasn't aimed at me. Sullivan was the one caught off guard. The creature's clawed hands shot forward, faster than I could track, sinking into his chest with a sickening crunch. His scream, a mixture of shock and pain, cut through the air like a knife. I reached for my weapon, my hands shaking, but I knew it was pointless. Nothing we had would stop them, not even our guns, not even our training. These were creatures born from some forgotten, terrifying corner of the world, and they were far beyond anything we had ever faced. The room seemed to close in on me as Sullivan struggled against the creature's grip, his legs flailing in a desperate attempt to break free. But it was no use. In seconds, the creature tore through him, its claws digging deep into his flesh, pulling him apart like paper. His scream died as his body was dragged into the darkness. I stood frozen, horror anchoring me in place. What could we do? There were no reinforcements, no help. We were on our own, facing something otherworldly. Then, another screech. This one was louder, sharper, and then I heard it, the sound of more movement. They were coming from every direction, surrounding us, closing in. There was no escape. I turned, trying to think, to find some way out. But as I spun, my flashlight flickered, casting an erratic beam across the room. That's when I saw it. More of them. The darkness seemed to pulse with their presence, like shadows warping into grotesque shapes. They slithered along the walls, moving with terrifying speed. Their glowing eyes were everywhere. Watching, waiting, they were calculating, not just attacking blindly but closing in slowly, methodically, as though savoring the hunt. I bolted, adrenaline flooding my veins, every muscle in my body screaming for survival. I could hear them behind me, feet scraping the concrete, claws clicking on metal. They were so close I could feel the chill of their breath against my neck. Smell the rank stench of their bodies. A mix of rotting flesh and saltwater. The exit. The door is ahead. But as I sprinted, a sound made my heart stop, a hiss, followed by the unmistakable sound of Sullivan's weapon. I turned my head just in time to see him, well, what was left of him. The creature had torn his body apart, leaving him a mangled mess in the middle of the room. Then, the creatures made their move. They converged on the pile of his remains, their eyes glistening with hunger. I saw them feast on what was left of him. The horror was too much. The kind of sickening nightmare that no human should ever witness. I didn't wait to see if they would turn on me next. My body was on autopilot now, my instincts taking over. I bolted for the door, my breath ragged, heart slamming against my ribs. The creatures, seemingly content with their feast, didn't follow immediately, but I knew that wouldn't last. I slammed the door open, stumbling out into the cold night air. But the feeling of being watched never left me. I could still feel their eyes on me. They were still out there, still hunting. I don't know how I made it back to the truck. I don't know how I survived that night. I only know one thing. The creatures weren't the worst part. They weren't the only thing we needed to fear. What I realized then, standing outside that warehouse, trembling in the cold, was that they had been sent. And the real horror, they weren't alone. Before we continue with more of the terrifying details of what happens next, make sure you're subscribed to Whispers in the Dark. This is just the beginning of a nightmare that will unfold in ways you never expected. Don't miss the rest of this chilling story. I sat in the truck, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was still racing, thumping loudly in my ears. The images from the warehouse played on a loop in my mind. Sullivan, the creatures, the screams, it all blurred together, a living nightmare I couldn't shake. The cold night air outside didn't help. It didn't clear the fog in my mind or ease the gnawing fear in my gut. I could still hear them, even though I was miles away from the warehouse now. Those damned creatures. It wasn't just the fact that they existed. It was their intelligence, their savagery, and how easily they had torn through the seals, people who were trained to handle the worst of the worst. How had they been hidden for so long? I didn't have answers, but I did have a question, one that had been eating at me since we first went into those caves in Alaska. Why had they kept it all from us? As I drove aimlessly down the dark, empty roads of Santa Monica, trying to calm myself, the unsettling feeling of being watched crept over me. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. My eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see one of those glowing eyes staring back at me, closing in on my position. But the mirror remained empty. The shadows in the night stretched and twisted in impossible ways, like the creatures were still out there, following me. When I turned off onto a small, secluded road leading toward the outskirts of the town, I realized I wasn't heading home. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. Not after what I had just seen. I needed answers, even if they didn't exist. I needed to speak to someone who knew more than I did. The low hum of the truck's engine was the only sound as I drove past deserted streets and overgrown fields. The moonlight casting long shadows across the dirt road. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that I needed to find some peace, some resolution to the madness that had overtaken my life. And then, it happened. A sharp flash of light cut through the darkness. I slammed on the brakes, my body jerking forward against the seatbelt. My eyes instinctively flicked to the side of the road. There, in the distance, I saw something, or rather, Someone, a figure standing by the trees. Tall and unmoving, watching me. The light from my headlights illuminated the figure for a brief moment before it was swallowed by the darkness again. I couldn't breathe. My heart thundered in my chest as I slowly pressed the brake, bringing the truck to a stop. The figure didn't move. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. My mind screamed at me to drive away, to get out of there before whatever it was, whoever it was, decided to come closer. But my legs didn't respond. My eyes were locked on the figure, now standing motionless, not even a footstep in the gravel. I watched, my hands trembling on the wheel, as the figure slowly raised one arm, pointing at me, and then, a whisper, faint but unmistakable, reached my ears. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the trees, it was words. "Come closer." I froze. The voice wasn't human. It didn't sound like anything I had ever heard before, low, guttural, like a rasping breath or a dry leaf crumbling in the wind. In a daze, I shoved the truck into drive and floored the gas pedal. The wheels spun, gravel flying, and the figure disappeared in my rearview mirror. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest motel, where I parked in the dark lot, cut off from the world. The room was quiet, too quiet, but that was the last thing on my mind. What had I just seen? What was it? The window rattled faintly from the wind, and I jerked my head toward the sound. The voice echoed in my mind, chilling and insistent, "Come closer." It felt like I had been marked, cursed by some unknown force. But I had no choice. I had to keep going. I had to find out what was happening before it consumed me. Hours later, the sound of the phone ringing snapped me out of my restless sleep. I bolted upright, heart pounding. Who would be calling me this late? I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 4 a.m. I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was distorted, the line full of static. "You shouldn't have run." The words struck me like a punch to the gut. My breath hitched, and I froze, the voice sending cold waves of fear crashing over me. "Who is this?" I demanded, but the only response was a distorted laugh, low and mocking. "They're coming for you." The phone line went dead. I couldn't sleep after that. I couldn't shake the feeling that the creatures were still out there, that they had followed me, waiting to claim me. But it wasn't just them anymore. It was the voice that spoke to me in the darkness. It knew my name. It knew I was on the brink of something far worse than I had ever imagined. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I left the motel, trying to clear my head. But I couldn't escape the feeling that something was hunting me. I reached out to my old friend, Dr. Olivia Carter, a marine biologist I had worked with on past operations. She had always been the rational one, the one who could see things logically. If anyone could help me make sense of the horrors I had seen, it was her. I drove for hours, finally reaching Olivia's research facility, tucked away near the cliffs of Big Sur, a place so remote it felt like the world had forgotten about it. The building was small, weathered by years of wind and salt from the ocean, but inside, it was a sanctuary of scientific knowledge and peace. Olivia greeted me at the door, her face pale and drawn. She had seen the research I'd sent her, seen the creature we had discovered, and now she knew the truth. "I know what you've seen, Daniel," she said softly, leading me inside. "It's not just one species. There are many." Her words hit me like a wave. "How is that possible?" She motioned for me to sit, and as I did, she began to explain. "The creatures you saw are ancient. But they're not just creatures. They were once human, part of a long-lost civilization that existed thousands of years ago. Their survival has been hidden from us for centuries. Buried in the deep. They are evolving. They are coming back." I looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "But why? What do they want?" Olivia shook her head. "I don't know, Daniel, but I believe they are searching for something that was lost. And I think they've found it." That's when I realized the full extent of the danger we were facing. The creatures were only the beginning. The true terror was what they were coming for. The room seemed to close in on me as Olivia's words sunk deeper. What had started as a simple investigation had now become a hunt. Not just for survival, but for answers to something far older and far more dangerous than we could ever have imagined. I stared at Olivia, trying to process everything she had said. What do you mean they were once human? How is that possible? She hesitated before speaking again. Her voice strained. It's not that simple. There are ancient records, legends, stories from civilizations long gone. Some even say these creatures are the remnants of a lost race. Humanity's first ancestors, who were forced into hiding, deep beneath the Earth's surface. Over the millennia, they evolved, adapted, and they've survived in isolation, far away from the rest of humanity. But why now? Why are they coming back? What could they possibly want with us? I asked, my voice shaky. I could feel the weight of the unknown bearing down on me. Olivia walked over to a desk in the corner, picking up a stack of faded, yellowed pages. I think I know what they're after. According to these records, there was something lost long ago, something vital to their survival. The truth is, they've been searching for it ever since, and I believe they've finally found it. Her words sent a shiver through me, a deep, cold fear that settled in my bones. What is it, Olivia? What are they searching for? She turned and looked me in the eyes. You. I blinked, disoriented. What? Their lineage? It's connected to you. It's in your blood. Olivia's voice was quiet but urgent, like she was revealing something far too dangerous to say aloud. I felt my chest tighten, panic rising. What do you mean? What does that have to do with me? Olivia continued, her eyes now filled with a mixture of fear and understanding. You were chosen for this mission for a reason. Daniel, there's something about your bloodline that connects you to them. They know you're coming, and they've been waiting for you to find them. I stumbled back from the desk, the room spinning around me. I couldn't breathe. The creatures were connected to me. How could that even be possible? I had never been told anything like this before. How was I supposed to process it? You're telling me I'm part of this? I asked, my voice a mere whisper. Olivia nodded solemnly. Yes, and I think they want you for something much worse than you can imagine. They've been tracking you, Daniel. They've known about you long before you ever set foot on that operation in Alaska. I felt the blood drain from my face. The very thought of being hunted by these beings, these twisted remnants of something older than civilization itself, sent waves of nausea through me. It wasn't just my team that had been targeted, it was me. I had been marked, not just as an investigator, but as something more, something they needed. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no escape from this. Not anymore. Olivia's voice snapped me out of my reverie. We have to act fast. Daniel, they're coming for you, and they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. I felt a cold sweat break out across my brow. The weight of her words was unbearable. I was running out of time. How do we stop them? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But there was no certainty in the question. I wasn't asking Olivia. I was asking myself. How could I possibly fight something like that? Something that had been hidden for so long. Something that had evolved. Olivia shook her head. Her eyes filled with both sorrow and determination. I don't know, but I think it's time we found out. We spent the next few hours in a frantic search for any clues that might point us toward a solution. Olivia pulled out maps, research notes, and old books, flipping through pages that seemed to hold the key to an ancient, terrifying truth. But every time I glanced at the pages, the weight of the unknown grew heavier. Each new discovery only led to more questions. How could something like this be hidden for so long? What kind of ancient beings were we up against? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that we were only just beginning to understand the scope of what we were dealing with. There was something deeper, something buried far beneath the Earth's surface that these creatures were desperate to find. But they weren't just after something. They were after me. As the sun began to set over Big Sur, I sat by the window, staring out at the ocean, lost in my thoughts. The sea looked deceptively calm, its waves gently crashing against the cliffs. But I knew better now. There was something down there, something lurking just out of sight. A sharp knock at the door interrupted my thoughts, and I quickly stood up. Olivia must have gone out for supplies. I grabbed my gun, instinctively ready for anything. When I opened the door, the last person I expected to see was Agent Robert Finch, an old acquaintance from my time in the military. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded. "You shouldn't be anywhere near this." Finch looked grim, his usual confidence replaced with something I hadn't seen before: fear. "They know you're here, Daniel," he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone, or something, to be following him. "And they've already started looking for you." That was the moment everything changed. Finch wasn't just here to give me some government spiel about protocol. He was here because he knew something I didn't. He knew they were getting closer, and we were running out of time. "We need to go," he said, his voice urgent. "It's not safe here anymore." Before I could ask any more questions, Finch grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the cabin. We climbed into his SUV, and he drove us away from Big Sur, heading north. As we sped through the night, I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see glowing eyes watching me from the shadows. The creatures, I knew, were out there. They were waiting. We reached a remote military base hidden deep in the California desert. It was isolated, quiet, exactly what we needed. Finch led me inside, where a group of military personnel was already gathered, preparing for something I wasn't privy to. "This is where we make our stand, Daniel," Finch said, his voice low. "We fight back. We stop them before it's too late." The weight of what he was asking hit me like a brick wall. Could we really stand against these ancient predators? These creatures that had been waiting for millennia? The thought seemed impossible, but there was no choice. We had to try. That night, as I lay in my makeshift bed in the base, I stared at the ceiling, the sound of the wind rattling the thin windows. I could feel him out there, just beyond the walls. The creatures were waiting. I didn't know how long we could hold them off, but I knew one thing: we had no choice but to fight. The hours dragged on in that eerie, quiet base, as the team prepared for what we knew was coming. The air felt thicker now, suffocating, as if the darkness itself had weight. Finch had led us to a secluded part of the military facility in the heart of the California desert. But I didn't feel safe. Every part of me screamed that we were just delaying the inevitable. That no matter how many weapons we gathered, no matter how many plans we drew up, the creatures were coming, and this time, they wouldn't just be coming for us, they would be coming for the whole world. I couldn't shake the feeling of their presence, the weight of their hunger, their glowing eyes, the way they moved so swiftly, effortlessly, as though they were designed to hunt in complete darkness. Even as I sat in that sterile room, surrounded by soldiers and military personnel, I could still feel them lurking, waiting just out of sight. The low murmur of voices filled the room as we briefed, but all I could think about was Sullivan, the sound of his scream echoing in my mind. His body had been torn apart in the warehouse, but I couldn't get the image of those creatures feasting on him out of my head. I had never been so close to death, so close to something so primal. "Hayes," Finch's voice broke through my thoughts. He was standing next to a map, pointing to locations around the globe. "We need to figure out where they're coming from. They've been tracking you for years. And now, they're finally close enough to attack." I blinked, the words shocking me back to reality. "They've been tracking me?" "Yes," Finch said, his eyes dark. "Ever since that mission in Alaska. We've picked up signals, strange energy readings, electromagnetic anomalies. But they weren't just monitoring us. They were waiting for you." My stomach twisted with unease. "What do they want with me?" Finch didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to a few of the men gathered around the table. They exchanged a look before one of them spoke up. We believe they want more than just your life. They want to use you. You're part of their ancient lineage. Daniel, the creatures, they're drawn to you. Something in your blood is calling them. The room went silent as his words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of something unspeakable. I stood up, my legs shaky. I'm not something for them to hunt. I'm just a man. Finch's voice grew softer, but no less urgent. I wish that were true, Daniel, but you're not just a man. You're their blood, and they've been waiting to take you back to where they came from. I couldn't process what I was hearing. My mind kept racing back to that cave. The cold, alien terror that had filled the air. The feeling of being watched, hunted. It wasn't just the creatures I had to fear. It was what they wanted from me. And I had no idea how to fight that. As the briefing continued, I tried to focus, tried to wrap my head around what I had learned. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, the creatures. Their glowing eyes, their monstrous forms. They weren't just hunting us. They were after something far more sinister. And they were closing in fast. Later that night, after the briefing ended, I was left alone in my quarters, staring at the ceiling. The cold silence of the desert outside pressed against the walls of the room. And the sound of my own breathing was the only thing that kept me grounded. My mind refused to settle. I kept thinking of the voice on the phone, the voice that had warned me. They're coming for you. It was the same voice I had heard in the warehouse. The one that had whispered to me in the dark. The voice wasn't just some random call. It was a warning, a message from the creatures themselves. Suddenly, I was struck with a realization. The voice, it wasn't just speaking to me. It was speaking for them. The creatures. They were trying to lure me out. To pull me closer, like a trap that was slowly closing around me. But why? Why had they been waiting for me? What was it about me that drew them from the depths of the ocean? From the corners of the world? As the hours stretched on, I heard something in the distance, a low, eerie hum that rattled the walls. It was like the sound of the wind, but it had a strange, unnatural quality to it. It echoed through the desert night, sending a chill down my spine. I got up, moving toward the window, my pulse quickening. The lights outside were dim, the shadows stretching long under the pale moonlight. But there, on the horizon, something glowed, just faintly at first, like a tiny spark, before it grew brighter, stronger, and then it hit me. It wasn't the lights of the base. It wasn't some odd reflection. No, this was something else, something coming toward us. Something that shouldn't exist. I rushed out of the room and down the hallway, bursting through the door of the command center. Finch and the rest of the team were gathered around, watching the monitors. "Do you see it?" I asked, my voice strained. Finch didn't answer immediately. His eyes were glued to the screen. The camera feed flickered and jumped. But what was unmistakable was the glowing, the unmistakable sign of creatures coming toward us. "Son of A." The words hung in the air, thick with dread. The creatures were already here. And this time, they weren't just after me. They were after all of us. The base erupted into chaos as alarms blared, flashing lights casting eerie shadows across the room. I grabbed my gear, heart pounding in my chest. There was no more time for questions. No time for answers. The creatures were closing in. Finch pulled me aside, his face grim. "We have to move now. They've found us." The rest of the night was a blur of action and terror. The creatures, no, they had already breached the perimeter. The military had underestimated the speed at which they moved, the strength with which they attacked. There were no more safe zones. No escape. As we fought our way through the base, I couldn't shake the thought that we were running out of time. Every corner, every hallway felt like a trap. I could hear the creatures behind us, their claws scraping against metal, their screeches filling the air. I turned a corner and stopped dead in my tracks. One of them, standing right there, its eyes locked with mine. I froze. It was just standing there, watching me. It wasn't attacking, it was waiting. Then, slowly, it opened its mouth, and that voice, the one from the warehouse, came again. "Come closer." The command was more than a simple instruction. It was a call, an invitation, and before I could stop myself, my feet started moving. I couldn't resist. I was being drawn toward it. It was as if something deep inside me, something ancient, something that had always been there, was answering its call. Before we continue with the descent into madness, don't forget to subscribe to Whispers in the Dark. The true horror has only just begun, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Stay with us as we uncover the full extent of the terror lurking beneath. The creature's gaze was like a drug, a force that tugged at me with an insidious magnetism. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, to fight, but I couldn't move. My body betrayed me, stepping closer, drawn toward it as if in a trance. The air thickened, and with every step, the darkness around me grew deeper, more oppressive. The creature's eyes, those glowing, intelligent eyes, stared into mine. It was impossible to look away. They weren't just looking at me. It felt as though they were inside me, probing every corner of my mind, searching for something only it understood. My heart raced faster, each beat drumming in my ears, louder than my thoughts. My legs shook with the effort of standing, yet they kept moving toward it, a step at a time. The air smelled of salt water, but it wasn't the clean, bracing scent of the ocean. It was rank, like something rotten, something foul that had been buried for centuries, left to rot in the dark places of the world. It spoke again, the voice smooth and insidious, low and throaty. "Closer, come closer." I froze mid-step, my hand trembling at my side as I reached for the weapon. But it felt useless against something that seemed to exist in a realm outside of all reason. It wasn't just an animal, not just a mindless predator. This thing was a force, a creature of pure malevolence, born of something ancient, something forgotten. The others had arrived. My thoughts were a haze. Too many things trying to claw their way into my consciousness all at once. I heard the rapid footsteps of my team behind me, Finch, Olivia, the soldiers. None of them had the pull I did. They were still firing at the other creatures, trying to keep them at bay, trying to fight back, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the one in front of me. The voice called again. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, but it didn't stop me from moving forward. "We're all in this together." The words felt like a command, pulling me into its web. I was being forced to witness something that wasn't just an invasion of space. This was something that violated the very fabric of what it meant to be human. These creatures were them. They were not aliens or animals. They were something worse, something that had once been like us but had been twisted and broken over time. In the corner of my vision, I saw Olivia make her way toward me, her face full of desperation. "Daniel, stop!" But her voice was swallowed by the roar of the creatures closing in. I turned, momentarily freed from the trance, and saw them, swarming, their silhouettes lurching in and out of the dim lighting, their glowing eyes like lanterns in the darkness. The room had become a battlefield, chaos exploding around us. The others were firing their weapons, but they were outnumbered. The creatures were too fast, too cunning. Then I heard it, the screech, the terrible, high-pitched screech that sent shivers up my spine, vibrating deep into my chest. One of the creatures lunged at Finch from the side. His scream was short, cut off by the snapping of his neck. His body was flung across the room as though he were nothing more than a ragdoll. I felt the air leave my lungs. Finch was gone, one of the most competent men I knew, dead in an instant. And for what? To bring them closer? I wasn't sure what had possessed me to reach for the gun. But I did. My hands were shaking violently, but I managed to steady myself enough to take aim at the creature closest to me. My finger squeezed the trigger. The gunshot echoed in the small room, the bullet tearing through the creature's shoulder. It shrieked in pain, but the wound seemed to do nothing to slow it down. It turned its gaze toward me, its eyes glowing brighter, angrier. It wasn't just a creature. It was a message. With Finch dead, and Olivia desperately trying to pull me out of the room, I realized that the mission had failed. We weren't here to stop them. We were here to become part of the story, part of the truth they wanted to expose, part of the reason they had waited for us. I felt a wave of cold wash over me, not from the outside, but from deep within, as though the depths of the ocean had reached into my very soul. This was not just about survival. This was about a legacy, something far older than any of us could imagine. They had been waiting for me, for someone like me, someone they could control, someone they could draw out into the open. Daniel, Olivia's voice broke through the haze. She was gripping my arm, pulling me toward the door. We need to go, now. I couldn't move. My legs felt like stone, like I was trapped in the very earth. Olivia tugged harder, but I resisted. She couldn't understand. She didn't see it. This wasn't just about escaping. This wasn't about fighting for our lives. It was about something else. I had to know. Then, from the shadows, the voice came again, cutting through the chaos with an unsettling clarity. You belong to us. It was a command, a declaration, the last thing I heard before I snapped into action, grabbing Olivia by the wrist and dragging her toward the exit. We ran, and the sound of claws scraping the walls behind us filled the air. Like a death knell, we made it outside, into the cool night air, the smell of dust and burning oil mixing in my lungs. My eyes scanned the horizon, but I didn't feel safe. Not anymore. The creatures were still out there, hunting. They were no longer confined to the deep. They had come for us. For me, the distant glow from the military base was still visible, but it felt like it was miles away now. I could hear the distant roar of engines, the screams of my team, but none of it mattered. The war was here, and it wasn't just a battle between man and beast. It was a war for control, a war to claim what had been lost. And the creatures, they had already won. We got to the car. Olivia was shaking, her breath ragged, but there was no time to stop. I had to keep moving, had to keep ahead of them. I slammed the door shut and slammed the gas, the tires screeching as I floored it, my heart pounding louder than the engine. But even as I sped through the night, I knew they were still out there, and they would come for me again. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to Whispers in the Dark. The truth is closer than you think, and we haven't even scratched the surface of this horror yet. Keep following, because the worst is yet to come. The car skidded over the rough road, the tires fighting for grip as I sped away from the military base. My heart racing, the weight of everything, the creatures, the destruction, the voices that had been following me, felt like a lead blanket over my chest. I glanced at Olivia, who was sitting beside me, staring out the window, her face pale, her eyes haunted. We can't outrun this, I muttered, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The truck veered sharply as I fought to keep control. It's coming for us. They're coming for us. Olivia didn't respond. She didn't need to. We both knew the truth now. A truth we couldn't unsee. The creatures, the monsters that had been hidden beneath the ocean for so long, weren't just mindless predators. They were more intelligent than anything we had ever encountered. And now they had a reason to find us. And it was worse than we could have ever imagined. They had been waiting. They had been waiting for someone with my blood. And I had no idea why. The road stretched out before us, winding through the mountains of Big Sur. The night was thick with the scent of saltwater and earth, the moon barely peeking through the cloud cover. I drove in silence, my mind racing with the impossibility of what had just unfolded. I thought I knew fear. I had seen death up close more times than I cared to remember. But this was something else entirely. This can't be real, I muttered. This can't be happening. But it was happening, and the reality of it was worse than any nightmare. We had barely made it out of that damn base before the creatures started to move again. The glow of their eyes had been everywhere, watching us from the darkness, waiting, It was like they knew everything about us. They knew our fears. They knew our weaknesses. They knew me. I didn't realize it at first. Not when we were in Alaska. Not even when the first of the creatures attacked. But sitting there in the car, the low hum of the engine the only sound. It began to dawn on me. The creatures weren't just some forgotten species. They were tied to something older. Something ancient. Something that could feel us. And that feeling, that deep sense of recognition, had been growing in me ever since the operation. I should have seen it, I said, slamming my fist against the steering wheel. I should have known. I'm one of them. Aren't I? Olivia turned to me then. Her face grave. You were chosen, Daniel, not by accident. They've been hunting people like you for centuries. And you just happen to be the one they've been waiting for. Her words stung, hitting me like a cold slap. I wasn't ready to hear this. I wasn't ready to accept it. The truth was clawing at the edges of my sanity, threatening to break through in a way I couldn't control. Why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What the hell do they want with me? Olivia looked out the window, her face pale. I don't know, but I think they were trying to protect something. Something that has been buried deep for so long. And you're part of it. You're connected to whatever it is. We drove in silence for the next few miles, my thoughts swirling in a tangled mess. The creature's eyes, their presence, had haunted me from the moment I laid eyes on them. I had known, deep down, that they were waiting, but now it was clear. Whatever they were searching for, whatever ancient purpose they had, was somehow tied to me. I had to know more. I had to understand it, even if it meant facing the darkest corners of my soul. We arrived at the abandoned facility Olivia had been researching for the past few years. The old marine research station was perched at the edge of the cliffs overlooking the ocean. A silent monument to what had been forgotten. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me as we walked inside. The stale air thick with the scent of mildew and dust. It was as if the very walls held the secrets we had been searching for. The secrets we were never meant to find. I've been here before, Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. I've tried to piece it together. The records, the old documents, the data we collected over the years, it's all here. But I never put the pieces together until now. I looked around, my eyes scanning the rusted equipment and empty rooms. The place felt like a tomb. But it wasn't just abandoned. It felt watched. There was something about it that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The shadows seemed too deep. The silence was too complete. What is this place, Olivia? I asked, my voice hoarse. Olivia led me down a narrow hallway, her footsteps echoing in the dark. She stopped in front of a large metal door, her hand trembling as she pushed it open. Inside, the room was filled with rows of old equipment, screens flickering with static, papers scattered across every surface. But what caught my eye wasn't the data, it was the wall. The wall was covered in sketches, maps, and old photographs. Some of the sketches were of creatures, twisted, grotesque forms, their eyes glowing in the dark, their limbs elongated, their faces a nightmarish combination of human and animal. There were notes scribbled next to them, but they were written in a language I couldn't understand, a language I had never seen before. This is what they were researching, Olivia said, stepping closer to the wall. They believed there were creatures beneath the surface of the ocean, but they didn't know just how deep it went. These creatures, they're older than anything we've known, and they've been hiding in plain sight, using the ocean as their cover. I stepped closer, my mind racing, but it wasn't just the creatures that frightened me. It was the symbols, the ancient writing. It was too familiar. I recognized the shapes, the lines, the patterns. This language, I muttered, my breath catching in my throat. It's the same. What do you mean? Olivia asked, turning toward me. I shook my head, but I couldn't deny it. The writing on the wall matched the symbols I had seen in the cave system. The same ones I had seen beneath the ocean's surface. The same ones that had haunted my dreams since the operation. They were the same. Where did they find this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Olivia's eyes filled with dread as she stared at the wall. They found it in the deepest part of the ocean, near Point Nemo, the most isolated point on Earth. The name struck me like a bolt of lightning. Point Nemo, the place where no human had ever ventured. It was a graveyard for spacecraft. A place where the Earth's oceans swallowed everything whole. If there was something at the bottom of the ocean, something hidden and ancient, this was where it would be. I suddenly felt like a puppet in someone's hands. And those hands were pulling the strings. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, suffocating, as I absorbed the weight of Olivia's words. I realized something terrible. The creatures weren't just out there, hunting me. They were searching for something bigger, something connected to their origins. They were trying to bring something back, something ancient, and now, they were using me to do it. The air in the small military base felt suffocating, heavier with each passing moment. It was no longer just the weight of the truth I was carrying, the weight of what I had seen, of what I had learned. It was the sense of something moving, watching, the creatures, the predators, the abominations. They were coming for us. But this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about unraveling the truth, about confronting a terror so ancient, so entrenched in the very fabric of the Earth that we had no hope of understanding it. Not really, not until it was too late. We had barely gotten any rest since we arrived at the Big Sur base. We were all exhausted, haunted by images of those glowing eyes, the terrible screeching, the agonizing sounds of bodies being torn apart in the dark. Olivia and I had spent hours poring over the old research documents, trying to make sense of the fragments of ancient knowledge that were buried in those cryptic notes. But it was all so disjointed. There was nothing concrete, nothing that gave us any real answers. Everything felt wrong, and the feeling of being hunted, of something lurking just beyond the edge of our vision, was gnawing at my every thought. It started in the dead of night. We were still going through the data, piecing together what we could from the scraps that had been left behind in the research facility. Olivia had been silent for a while, studying a map of the ocean floor, her fingers tracing the deep crevices and trenches where the creatures had been found. I didn't notice the first sign until it was too late. The air shifted. It wasn't a breeze, it was a sudden change. Like the room had gotten colder. I could feel it creeping in, like an oppressive weight pushing against my chest. It made my skin crawl. I turned to Olivia, about to speak, when I saw it. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide with terror. "Olivia," I whispered, moving closer. "What is it?" She didn't answer immediately. She just pointed, her hand trembling, her finger shaking toward the window. I turned my head, and for a split second, I thought I saw something outside. A figure, standing just beyond the reach of the dim lights that filtered through the cracked blinds. But it wasn't a person. It wasn't even human. It was wrong. It didn't move like a person moved. It was too still. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, hunched slightly as if it were uncomfortable in its own body. Its limbs were too long, its shadow too distorted. I couldn't make out any details, just the outline. But the feeling it gave me was unmistakable. It was watching us. Suddenly, there was a bang against the window. The sound was so sharp, so violent, it made my blood run cold. I jumped back, heart racing, and Olivia cried out, grabbing onto my arm. "Get down," she hissed. Without thinking, I dropped to the floor, pulling her down with me. The room fell into total darkness as the lights flickered and then went out completely. The air was thick, as if the darkness itself had substance. I strained to hear. My breath caught in my throat. My eyes strained to make out any shape in the gloom. But all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Then, I heard it, a low, guttural noise from outside, something that sounded almost like scraping, scratching. It was coming closer. I grabbed my gun, the cold metal reassuring in my hand. Though I knew it was useless against whatever was out there, whatever had found us. The window shattered suddenly, a sharp sound that echoed in the stillness. Glass rained down around us, and I instinctively shielded Olivia. But she wasn't crying out. She was completely still, her face pale in the dark. "Olivia," I whispered, but she didn't respond. I looked up, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A claw, long, jagged, and covered in dark, translucent skin, slithered through the broken window, scraping against the frame with a sound that made my skin crawl. It was followed by another claw, then another, and then, through the shattered glass, came the creature. It wasn't like the ones we had faced before. This one was different. It was bigger, more grotesque, its body a twisted mix of human and something alien, with skin that shimmered faintly in the darkness, like something living in the shadows. Its eyes locked onto mine. My breath caught in my throat. I raised my weapon, but it didn't move. It just stood there, its glowing eyes piercing the dark like twin beacons. And then, it spoke. "You know we're here." The voice came not through sound, but in my mind, a cold whisper, a sickening echo that made my insides twist. I could feel its presence, pressing against my thoughts, forcing its way into my mind. "You cannot hide. You cannot run." It was no longer a simple hunt. This was something else. The creatures, they weren't just predators. They were predators with purpose. And that purpose, it involved me. The creature's claws scraped against the floor as it stepped closer. Its movements slow, deliberate. I could feel the air grow colder, the room growing heavier with its presence. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. The weight of its gaze was unbearable. And as I stood there, paralyzed, I realized something. This wasn't just an attack. It was a message, and I was the messenger. With a sharp motion, I finally moved, pulling Olivia down the hall and out of the building. The creature didn't chase us. It didn't need to. It had already won. I wasn't sure how far we ran, or for how long. The world had blurred into a haze of panic and fear. The only thing I could focus on was the feeling of being hunted. The knowledge that the creatures weren't just after us. They were after me. I wasn't just running from them anymore. I was running from my own past, from something inside me that I had never understood. As we reached the edge of the base, we stopped, gasping for air, but the creature's presence was still with me, gnawing at my mind. I could feel its eyes on me, even now, even from miles away. "I don't understand," Olivia said breathlessly, staring at me, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "What do they want with you? Why you?" I shook my head, my mind a mess of emotions. "I don't know, but they've been waiting for me. And now, I don't think they're going to stop." The night passed in a blur of preparation and fear. We couldn't go back to the base. We couldn't stay in one place for too long. But there was nowhere to run. The creatures were always one step ahead, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment was coming. As I lay in the dark, the wind howling outside, I realized that this was no longer just about survival. This was about understanding the creatures, understanding their purpose, and most terrifying of all, it was about confronting the dark truth that lay within me. They weren't just chasing me, they were calling me home. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to Whispers in the Dark. The terror is far from over. Stay tuned, because the truth is deeper than you ever thought possible. The air in the cabin was thick with tension, the silence pressing in on us like a physical force. We were standing at the precipice, on the edge of something far greater than we had anticipated. What had started as an operation to investigate strange disappearances had now turned into a battle for our lives. And the true horror of what we were up against, the creatures, the ancient terror waiting for us, had only just begun to reveal itself. The night had been quiet, almost unnaturally so. The base we had fled to was cut off from civilization, tucked away in the heart of Big Sur, far from prying eyes. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet wasn't peace. It was waiting. The creatures were out there, hidden in the shadows, watching us. We didn't speak much. Olivia and I had exchanged only a few words since we ran from the facility. But none of them seemed to matter anymore. The truth we had discovered, about the creatures, about my connection to them, had left us both in shock, struggling to find a way out of the nightmare we were trapped in. Olivia was pacing by the window, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. I didn't know what she was thinking, but I knew what was going through my mind. The creatures weren't just after us. They were after me. They had been waiting. "We need to go deeper," Olivia suddenly said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a decision that had been slowly forming in her mind. I turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" She walked over to the table, pulling out a series of maps and research documents. "The creatures are not just hunting us. They've been tracking something ancient, something buried deep in the earth." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "You're saying they've been looking for something all this time?" She nodded grimly. "Yes, and I think I know where it is." I moved closer to her, staring at the map she was pointing to. It wasn't just the ocean, as I had assumed. It was Point Nemo, the most isolated point on Earth. The same place we had been sent to investigate earlier. The place where the ocean's depths had swallowed us whole. Olivia's fingers traced a line on the map, leading to a series of coordinates. "We need to go to the heart of the ocean. The creatures are not just coming from the surface, they're coming from below." It took me a moment to absorb what she was saying. Point Nemo, the place where no human had ever gone. The place where the creatures had been hidden, where they had lain in wait, waiting for someone to uncover them. My heart pounded in my chest. "You can't be serious." Olivia turned to face me, her eyes dark with determination. "We have no choice, Daniel. The creatures are getting stronger. They're coming for us, and they won't stop until they get what they want. We need to go to the source. We need to find out what they're really after." I couldn't argue with her logic. We had run, we had hidden, but none of that mattered anymore. The truth was inescapable, and we were caught in its web. The creatures were out there, and they had a purpose, one that had nothing to do with us. We were just part of their story. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was about understanding the creatures, understanding them, and understanding the twisted history that had led us here. The next morning, we set out in a small research vessel that Olivia had arranged. It wasn't much, just a boat with enough equipment to monitor the ocean's depths. But it was all we had. I wasn't sure what we were expecting to find. The ocean was a vast, uncharted abyss, and we were about to dive into it, head first. As we left the coast behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being drawn into the very mouth of hell. The fog rolled in, thick and suffocating, turning the sea into a black, endless void. We couldn't see anything beyond the boat, just the faint outline of the horizon. I stood at the edge of the boat, staring out into the fog, the weight of the unknown pressing against me. Every instinct in my body screamed to turn back, to get out of the water. But I couldn't, not when we were so close to the truth, not when we were about to uncover something that had been buried for centuries. Hours passed in silence, the boat rocking gently on the waves. I could feel the tension building, the anticipation growing as we got closer to Point Nemo. Every creak of the boat, every splash of water against the hull, felt like a warning. Something was out there, waiting. I didn't know what, but I could feel it in my bones. The creatures weren't just hunting in the ocean, they were waiting beneath it. As we approached the coordinates on the map, Olivia fired up the sonar. The machine beeped, its display flashing with data. But nothing on the screen made sense. It was a blank void, a black hole where the ocean should have been. "This isn't right," Olivia muttered, her fingers flying over the controls. "We should be picking up something." I peered over her shoulder at the display. The sonar was showing nothing but empty space. And then, as we moved closer to the center of the coordinates, the screen flickered. It was a brief moment. Just a flash. But in that instant, I saw it. Something large, something massive, moving beneath us. Olivia's voice was tight with anxiety. What the hell is that? The boat lurched as if it had hit something beneath the surface. We were thrown off balance. And I struggled to keep my footing. The low hum of the sonar intensified, the frequency rising with each passing second. I could feel the tension building. And then I heard it, the sound of something shifting beneath the water. It wasn't just the waves. It was something else. I grabbed the edge of the boat, my heart racing as I looked over the side. The water was a sickly green, churning with movement. I saw shadows beneath the surface, large shapes moving in the depths, their forms shifting in the dark. And then, I saw it. The creature broke through the surface in a flash of glistening, translucent skin. It wasn't just one, there were hundreds of them. Their long, twisted bodies rising from the depths like serpents. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, a cold, alien brilliance that burned through the fog. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. It was like time had stopped. We were trapped, surrounded by creatures that shouldn't exist. Olivia's voice cut through my daze. We need to get out of here. Now. But it was too late. The creatures surged forward, moving faster than I could comprehend. They were everywhere, swarming the boat, their claws scraping against the hull, their glowing eyes locking onto us. They were coming. I grabbed the throttle, pushing the boat forward, but the creatures were faster. They were pulling the boat toward them, their strength more than anything I could fight against. The water around us churned with a violent force, the creatures dragging the boat into the abyss. Then, the most terrifying sound I had ever heard erupted from beneath the boat. It wasn't a roar, it was something worse, a deep, guttural sound that reverberated through the water, through my very soul. It was like the sound of something ancient, something powerful, rising from the depths. I looked down, and for a brief moment, I saw the true scale of what we were dealing with. The creature, no, the beast, was enormous. Its body was a dark, gleaming mass, its shape impossible to comprehend. It had no form that made sense, no lines or edges. It was like it was made of the ocean itself, a living nightmare that had come to life. The creature's gaze fixed on me, and in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just a fight for survival. This was something far worse. This was a battle for control, a battle to reclaim something that had been lost, buried beneath the waves for centuries. And I was at the center of it. The water churned violently around us. The boat tilted sharply as the creature, or rather creatures, closed in. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to turn the boat around, to get the hell out of there. But there was no time. The creatures were faster than I could fathom, their massive bodies gliding through the water with terrifying ease. Their claws scraped against the sides of the boat, sending vibrations that rattled through my bones. I could hear their hissing, a low, guttural sound that seemed to echo from the depths of the ocean itself. It was as if the very water was alive, alive with something ancient, something monstrous that had been waiting in the dark corners of the world, hidden from humanity for centuries. The boat lurched again, and this time, it wasn't just the creature's claws tearing at the hull. I felt a sudden, crushing pressure, like the ocean itself was closing in around us. The boat groaned, the wooden frame creaking under the strain, and I could see the water rising, inching higher and higher. "They're pulling us in," Olivia shouted over the roar of the waves, her voice barely audible. She was right. The creatures weren't just attacking us, they were dragging us into their domain. Their grip on the boat was relentless, pulling us deeper into the abyss, closer to whatever waited below. I slammed the throttle down, trying to push forward, but it was useless. The creatures were too powerful. They were everywhere. Their eyes gleamed through the water like phosphorescent flames, their bodies writhing in the darkness, closing in from all sides. And then, as if by some sick twist of fate, The fog around us thickened, swallowing everything in sight. The world grew darker, colder. I couldn't see anything anymore. Not the creatures. Not the horizon. Only the swirling abyss that surrounded us. I felt it then, the unmistakable sensation of something huge moving beneath us. Something far larger than the creatures we had been fighting. It wasn't just a creature. It was something alive. And whatever it was coming closer, faster, pulling us toward it. The roar from beneath the water rose to a deafening crescendo. It wasn't just a sound. It was a vibration that rattled the bones. A force that shook the very air around us. Oh my God, it's huge, Olivia screamed, her eyes wide with terror as she looked at the water below. Her face was ghostly pale, and for the first time, I saw true fear in her eyes. I didn't need to see it. I could feel it, the presence, the hunger, radiated from the depths, from something ancient, far older than the creatures themselves. It was waiting for us, like some predatory force that had been drawn to our very existence. The boat lurched again, this time with more force than before. I looked over my shoulder, but I couldn't see anything through the thick fog. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the creature let go, the pressure easing as it retreated back into the depths. I turned the boat around instinctively, pushing it forward. But the ocean felt different now. It felt alive, pulsing with an energy that was alien to anything I had ever known. We were no longer in control. The ocean itself had claimed us, dragging us deeper into its cold, black heart. We continued to speed forward. Or at least, I thought we were. The water seemed to move with a life of its own, like it was pulling us in multiple directions at once. The boat rocked violently, waves crashing over the sides, drenching us both. I could barely hear myself think over the roaring water, but then something else caught my attention, a faint sound beneath the chaos. It wasn't the roar of the creatures. It wasn't the crashing of the waves. It was a voice. You will follow. The words were distorted, like they were coming from deep within the ocean itself. I turned to Olivia, my eyes wide. She was already looking at me, her face pale and tight with fear. I heard it too, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's them. The creatures weren't just hunting us, they were calling to us. The voice wasn't just an echo. It was a command, and the closer we got to Point Nemo, the stronger it became. I pushed forward, trying to ignore the rising sense of dread. The creatures were still following us, their eyes flashing in the depths. But now, I could feel something else, something more powerful, closing in on us from below. It wasn't just the creatures, it was them. The ancient force that had been waiting for us. I don't know how long we drifted in the fog, or how much time had passed since we first encountered the creatures. The boat had stopped moving completely, bobbing on the surface, the engine dead. We were stuck. But it didn't matter, the creatures were closing in. I could see their eyes now, more than just the ones from the water's surface. They were in the water, deep below us, and I knew they were waiting for the right moment. I turned to Olivia, her face barely visible in the dim light. We can't just sit here. We need to find a way out. She nodded, her hands trembling. We need to go deeper. We need to get to the source. I didn't understand what she meant. The source? She turned to me, her eyes filled with fear and resolve. The creatures are looking for something. They're drawn to something. You. I shook my head. I don't know what you mean. I don't, but she cut me off. The creatures have been waiting for you. Daniel, it's not just about the ocean. It's about what's buried beneath it. They're drawn to something inside you. I stepped back, trying to wrap my head around what she was saying. But the pieces didn't fit. I wasn't part of whatever they were looking for. I couldn't be. I wasn't special. I wasn't anything more than a soldier. But Olivia's face, her eyes, told me that she knew something I didn't. She had been researching this for years. And she had just revealed a terrifying truth. I was the key. That's when I heard it again. The voice. You belong to us. It was coming from below. From the depths. echoing through the water, reverberating in my skull. This time, it wasn't just a command. It was a promise. The creatures weren't just hunting us. They were calling us, and they weren't going to stop until they had what they wanted. Without warning, the boat lurched again, but this time, it wasn't just the creatures. The ocean itself seemed to roar, the water swirling violently beneath us. The boat was being pulled under, dragged into the depths, as if the very sea had decided to claim us. "Hold on," Olivia screamed, grabbing my arm as the boat began to capsize. I held onto her tightly, but I knew it was too late. The creatures were closing in. The water churned around us. And then, everything went black. The water had taken us. Or at least, it had tried to. We had barely escaped the ocean's grasp, its cold, relentless pull, as the creatures surged beneath us, dragging the boat toward the heart of the abyss. But we had reached the shore of an island, a small patch of land lost to time, hidden in the fog. It was as if the world had forgotten it existed. It was here that I realized the true weight of everything. The creatures, the voice calling to me, the terror I felt gnawing at my soul. It wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about understanding the forces at play, forces that had been pulling the strings for longer than I could comprehend. But I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't escape the truth. The creatures were connected to me, to my blood, and I had no idea why. The island was eerily quiet. The fog clung to the ground like a shroud, twisting the trees into ghostly silhouettes. The only sound was the crashing of waves on the shore and the faint groan of the wind. My skin prickled with unease. Every instinct in me screamed that we weren't safe here. Not anymore. "We need to keep moving," Olivia said, her voice strained as she helped me to my feet. "They won't stop coming for you, Daniel." I stood up, feeling the weight of her words settle deep in my bones. "What is this place? Olivia, what are we doing here?" She looked around, her eyes filled with dread. "I don't know, but I have a feeling we're not supposed to be here. This place, it feels wrong. But it's where they want us to be." I turned, following her gaze toward the center of the island. In the distance, hidden behind thick trees, was a structure, old, decaying, but unmistakable. It was a research facility, one of the earliest installations from the first expeditions to study the depths of the ocean. The place had been abandoned years ago, forgotten by the world, or perhaps it had been left behind. And that's when I realized the horrifying truth. They had been waiting for us. They had always been waiting for someone to find them. Someone like me. We approached the facility cautiously, the fog swallowing us as we moved through the dense trees. The air was thick with something I couldn't place, an unnatural stillness. As if the island itself was holding its breath. When we reached the door, I hesitated. The rusted metal, the shattered windows, and the eerie silence. It was as though the place had been frozen in time. I could hear nothing inside. No movement, no life. I pushed the door open, and we stepped inside. The interior of the facility was a labyrinth of corridors, each one darker and colder than the last. The walls were lined with old, weathered research papers, maps of the ocean floor, and images of creatures unlike any I had ever seen. They were sketches of horrors, drawn with trembling hands by those who had dared to venture too deep into the ocean's heart. The deeper we went, the more unsettling it became. The lights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, and I could feel a presence watching us from the dark corners of the building. Someone, was still here. I felt it before I saw it. The cold, it wrapped around me like a vice, sinking into my skin, numbing my thoughts. My vision blurred. The air became heavier with every breath I took. The walls seemed to close in around me. "Olivia," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "I don't think we're alone." She turned sharply, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you mean?" And that's when I heard it. A low, rumbling growl coming from somewhere deep in the building. It wasn't the creatures. No, this was something worse. The growl turned into a hiss. A screeching sound that reverberated through the walls, through my very bones. Before we could react, something moved in the shadows. A shape, something tall, unnaturally tall, with limbs too long and too thin. It wasn't human, it wasn't anything that should have existed. I raised my gun instinctively, but I couldn't bring myself to pull the trigger. The creature stood in front of us, its glowing eyes locking onto mine. And I knew this was no ordinary being. This was something else, something more ancient, more intelligent. It was the one we had been searching for. "You're too late, Daniel," the voice came from its mouth. But it wasn't a sound. It was inside my head. A voice that rumbled through my skull, chilling me to my core. The creature's mouth didn't move. It didn't need to. I staggered back, my legs weak, but I couldn't look away. The creature's gaze was hypnotic, like it was reading my thoughts, twisting them into something darker. "We've been waiting for you." My pulse thundered in my ears as I struggled to understand. Waiting for me? The creature took a slow step forward, its limbs jerking unnaturally, its movements erratic but deliberate. Each step sent a shudder through the room. I could feel the floor vibrate beneath me, like the building itself was alive. "You don't understand, Daniel." Its voice was in my mind again, echoing, growing louder. "You're part of the reason we're here. You've always been part of this, even before you knew it." I backed away, but the creature advanced, its glowing eyes never leaving mine. "You were chosen. You were always meant to find us." Suddenly, I understood. The creatures, the ones I had fought, the ones that had been hunting me, they weren't alien. They weren't invaders. They were part of us. They were the forgotten remnants of humanity's first ancestors. Creatures who had been pushed to the brink of extinction. Their bloodlines lost, forgotten, hidden in the depths of the ocean. But they had never stopped searching. They had never stopped waiting for the one who would bring them back to the surface. And that one was me. I dropped to my knees, the weight of the truth crushing me. Everything I had known, everything I had believed, was a lie. The creatures, the terror, the strange connection I had felt, it wasn't just a random event. It was destiny, it was fate. Olivia's voice cut through the fog of my thoughts. "Daniel," she cried, "we have to leave. We can't stay here." But it was too late. The creature lunged at us. Its movements were so fast, so erratic. I barely had time to react. I grabbed Olivia's arm, pulling her toward the exit. But the creature was faster. It had anticipated our movements, its long claws reaching out and swiping at us. We ran. The walls of the facility seemed to stretch on forever. But the creature was right behind us. Its screeches filled the air, louder, more urgent, until it felt like the very building was trembling with its rage. We burst through the door, into the open air, but the island was no safer than the building. The fog had thickened, swirling around us like a living thing. I could hear the creature's growls, low and threatening, closing in on us. Olivia and I stumbled through the dense fog, the weight of the world pressing down on us. The creature was out there, watching, waiting, and I knew one thing for sure. The truth was a curse, and I had unleashed it. We should have seen it coming. The moment we fled the island, the moment we thought we were safe, we should have known that safety was a fleeting illusion. You don't run from something that ancient, that powerful, without paying the price. And now, the creatures were coming for us, with a vengeance. The creature that had confronted us in the abandoned research facility wasn't alone. I could feel its presence, even from the distance of the boat. It had left its mark on us, imprinted itself in the deepest corners of our minds, like a curse that would never be lifted. We thought we could outrun it, find a way to stop it. But we were fools. You can't outrun something that has been waiting for millennia. We set sail from Big Sur, the boat cutting through the choppy waters of the Pacific. The fog seemed to swallow us whole as we moved farther from the island. I could feel the unease settling deep within me, a gnawing feeling that something was wrong. Something was coming. Olivia stood at the helm. Her face grim, her eyes scanning the waters. "We're not safe yet," she said, her voice tight. "They won't let us go that easily." "What are we supposed to do, Olivia?" I asked, my voice breaking. "We can't just keep running. The creatures, they'll find us again. They'll always find us." Olivia's face hardened. "We need to know more about them. About what they want. This is bigger than just us. They're not just hunting us. They're trying to reclaim something. They're after something." I turned away, trying to block out the feeling of dread that was creeping into my mind. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the sense that the creatures were closer, waiting for the right moment to strike. The water seemed to close in around us, the waves crashing harder, the wind picking up, pushing us back toward the dark, unforgiving depths of the ocean. We had barely made it out of Big Sur, but the creatures were already hunting us. Their presence loomed over us, just beyond our reach, waiting to drag us back into the abyss. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something terrifying. The creatures weren't just part of the ocean. They were part of something older, something far more ancient. They were connected to the earth itself, to a history long buried and forgotten. And somehow, I was tied to that history. The island had been the first clue. The ancient research facility buried deep within it held the answers we were looking for. But it had also revealed something much darker. It had revealed the truth that I was part of something far more terrifying than I could comprehend. And now, I was beginning to understand. The creatures weren't just hunting. They were searching for something, someone. They were trying to reclaim what had been taken from them. And that something was tied to my bloodline. The days blurred into one long, tense journey as we sailed deeper into the heart of the Pacific. We were headed toward Point Nemo, the isolated point in the ocean that had become the center of everything. The place where the creatures had been waiting, hidden beneath the surface for centuries. I didn't know what we would find there, but I knew one thing for certain: we were walking straight into their trap. When we reached Point Nemo, the sea was unlike anything I had ever seen. The waters were dark, almost black, stretching out into an endless horizon. The fog was thicker here, clinging to the water like a living thing, as if it were alive, suffocating everything in its grasp. We anchored the boat in the middle of the sea, the silence around us oppressive. The only sound was the faint hum of the boat's engine and the wind that howled in the distance. My heart raced as I stared out at the water. It was as if the ocean itself was waiting for something. Something only the creatures knew. "We need to dive," Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've been waiting for us. And we're about to find out why." I nodded, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I had known this moment would come. But that didn't make it any easier. We were going to dive into the depths, into the unknown. And we had no idea what we would find down there. We prepared the dive equipment, the air tanks, the lights, but as I strapped on the gear, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I looked around, but all I could see was the endless expanse of water and fog. Then, I heard it, the screech. It was a sound I recognized. The same sound I had heard in the research facility. The same sound I had heard in the depths of the ocean. The creatures were closing in. "We don't have much time," Olivia said, her face tense. "We need to go, now." We dove into the water. The cold shock of the ocean surrounding us as we descended deeper and deeper into the abyss. The water was darker here, colder, and the silence was suffocating. Every movement felt like a violation of the stillness. And every breath I took felt like it might be my last. We reached the ocean floor, and what we found there made my blood run cold. There was something there, something large, something ancient. It wasn't just a creature. It was a structure, a massive, broken edifice, half submerged in the sand. It was a temple of sorts. But unlike anything I had ever seen, the walls were covered in strange symbols, markings that looked both alien and familiar. They seemed to pulse with an energy that I could feel deep in my bones. "This is it," Olivia said, Her voice coming through the comms. This is where they came from. This is where they've been hiding. As we explored the ruins, I realized something horrifying. This wasn't just a temple. It was a tomb that had been waiting for someone to open it. And then, as I reached out to touch the symbols on the wall, I felt it. A pulse. It was like the ocean itself was alive. And the moment I made contact, the temple came to life. The walls began to vibrate. And the water around us started to stir. As if something was waking up. I pulled my hand back. But it was too late. The creatures had found us. The screeching grew louder, more intense. I turned just in time to see the shadows of the creatures moving toward us. They were emerging from the depths, their glowing eyes flashing in the dark water. Olivia was already moving, but I couldn't move fast enough. One of the creatures lunged at me, its claws scraping across my suit as it tried to pull me into the darkness. I shot it with my harpoon gun, but it barely flinched. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, and for a moment, I thought I had been pierced by its claws. But I couldn't think about that. All I could think about was getting out of there, getting back to the surface before they pulled us down into the abyss. The creatures were everywhere, surrounding us, their glowing eyes filling the water like fireflies in the dark. I could hear their screeching, their growls, and I realized something then. They weren't just attacking us. They were calling to something. And that something was coming. I grabbed Olivia, pulling her toward the surface. My heart pounding in my chest. The creatures were closing in. Their claws reaching for us. Their voices growing louder in our minds. And then, I saw it. A massive form, rising from the ocean floor. It was larger than anything I had ever seen. It was a beast, a nightmare come to life. Its glowing eyes focused on us as it emerged from the depths. We were trapped. There was no escape. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to Whispers in the Dark. The creatures aren't just hunting us. They're bringing something far worse to the surface. Stay with us, because the end is closer than we think. The water felt unnatural beneath us. The depths pressing down like a heavy, suffocating blanket. We had dived into the heart of the abyss, the place where nightmares were born. And creatures long forgotten had been waiting, watching, and preparing to rise. The beast that had emerged from the depths was unlike anything I had ever seen. Its size was incomprehensible, its form an unholy marriage of sea creature and something far older. Far more ancient. It was an abomination, born from a time when the earth was young. And the creatures beneath the ocean had once ruled with impunity. I thought I had seen terror before. But this was something different. This was the true face of horror, something that had been buried, forgotten, and left to rot in the depths of the earth. I couldn't look away. I couldn't escape the pull of its eyes, glowing with an intelligence that went far beyond anything human. It knew us. It knew me. It was as if the creatures had been waiting for the moment when we would come to face them, when we would open the door to the ancient evil they had been hiding from the world. I dragged Olivia through the water, the weight of the creature's presence pressing down on me. Its eyes followed us, unblinking, as we made our way back toward the surface. But the sea was fighting against us. The waves had turned violent, the ocean now a swirling maelstrom, pulling us toward the darkness below. It wasn't just the creatures that were coming. It was the very ocean itself, awakening with the fury of 1,000 storms. We can't outrun it, Olivia gasped, her face pale with fear. They're everywhere. They're coming for us. Daniel, I didn't need to be told. I could feel it in my bones. The creatures, the beasts, they were closing in. They weren't just hunting us. They were bringing something worse. Something we couldn't even comprehend. I tried to swim faster. But it was no use. The current had changed, and with it came the deep, crushing pressure of the ocean, threatening to drag us down, to pull us into the abyss from which there was no return. Then, we heard it. The screech. It was a sound that cut through the water, cutting through my very soul. It was a call, a signal, a warning, but it was more than that. It was the sound of a war that had been brewing for millennia. The war between humanity and something far older, far more powerful. I turned to Olivia, my eyes wide with dread. "We need to get out of here. Now." She didn't answer, her gaze fixed on the churning water ahead. There, just beneath the surface, I saw them, the creatures, dozens of them, their glowing eyes cutting through the murky water like beacons, their twisted forms moving with terrifying speed, closing in on us with an unrelenting force. We broke the surface of the water, gasping for air, but the sight before us was worse than anything I had imagined. The creatures were no longer just emerging from the depths. They were swarming, their eyes flashing, their claws reaching for us with a hunger that couldn't be satisfied. Olivia and I scrambled to the boat, my hands shaking as I pulled her aboard. The creatures were circling us, their eyes glowing brighter with every second, their screeches filling the air, growing louder, more frenzied. "We can't outrun them," I said, my voice trembling. "They're too fast, too many." Olivia looked at me, her face pale, but there was a fire in her eyes now. "Then we fight." We had no choice. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. We were in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by creatures that had been hunting us for days. But this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about understanding what we were up against. We couldn't just escape. We had to fight. We had to stop them, or they would destroy everything. The boat was our last line of defense, and I wasn't going to let it go down without a fight. I grabbed the flare gun, my fingers trembling as I loaded it. Olivia handed me a harpoon, and I felt the weight of it in my hands. It was no match for the creatures, but it was all we had. And then they were upon us. I barely had time to react before one of the creatures leapt out of the water, its claws slashing at the side of the boat. The force of the blow sent us tumbling, the boat rocking violently. I fired the flare gun, the bright light bursting through the fog, illuminating the creature for a brief moment. It wasn't enough. The creature screeched, its long, spindly fingers reaching for me. I swung the harpoon, slashing at its arm, but the creature barely flinched. It was too strong, too fast. I managed to get a good shot, driving the harpoon deep into its chest. The creature howled in pain, but it didn't retreat, it just fought. The battle was chaos. The creatures came at us from all sides, swarming the boat with a frenzy that was both animalistic and calculated. They were working together, coordinating their attacks, trapping us in the center of the boat. It was as if they knew exactly what we would do, what we would try, but we couldn't stop, we couldn't give up. I fired the flare gun again, hitting another creature in the chest. But this time, the light from the flare illuminated something far worse. From the depths, something massive rose, a shape so large it blocked out the sky, its form moving with a slow, deliberate force. It was the beast, the ancient monster that had been calling us, waiting for us to come. Its eyes were massive, glowing with an otherworldly light, its body writhing as it emerged from the ocean's depths. Its form was more terrifying than anything I had imagined. It was a mass of shifting limbs and unnatural shapes, its movements jerky and erratic, like something that had never been meant to move in our world. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth, its voice a deafening roar that made the ocean tremble. "You belong to us." The voice was deep, a vibration that went through my bones, rattling everything inside me. I felt a sharp pain in my side as one of the creatures slashed across my chest. And I stumbled, but there was no time to think about it. I had to keep fighting. The beast moved closer, its massive form towering over the boat. The creatures were closing in, their screeches filling the air, drowning out everything else. We were surrounded, trapped in a battle that we could never win. And then, something unexpected happened. The ocean shifted. The waves grew louder, more violent, as if the very sea was responding to the beast's call. The creatures paused, their eyes flickering as they turned toward the horizon. The water grew darker, colder, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something huge, rising beneath the water. Olivia looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "What is that?" I didn't have an answer. I could only stare in horror as the ocean seemed to come alive. The creatures were no longer the only threat. There was something deeper, something more dangerous that had been awakened by the beast's call. The sea was rising, and it wasn't just water. It was life. Suddenly, the boat jerked violently, throwing us both into the water. I gasped for air, but the water was cold. Too cold, and I couldn't see anything in the thick fog. I kicked my legs, swimming desperately, but the current was pulling me down, pulling me toward something worse. And then, I saw it, a massive shape rising from the depths. A shadow in the water so large it blocked out everything else. It was them. The creatures weren't just a species. They were part of something ancient. And they had been waiting for us. The truth was clear now. We had been part of their plan all along. We were the key to something older, something darker than anything we could have imagined. And now, they were ready to reclaim it. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to Whispers in the Dark. The creatures have awakened, and the war has just begun. Stay with us as the horror unfolds. The water swallowed me whole. I don't remember much about the fall, the force of the impact, the shock of the cold, the searing pain that tore through my body. One moment I was reaching for Olivia. The next I was submerged, drowning in the endless depths of the ocean. The darkness closed in on me, the weight of it pressing down so hard that I felt like my chest was going to collapse. The creatures were all around me, their eyes flashing from the murk, their claws raking through the water with a speed and force that made my body shake with terror. I had thought that I was ready for this, thought that I could survive. But I wasn't. I couldn't even fight back. The ocean had become a living thing, its currents dragging me deeper and deeper into a place where even the light had long since died. I gasped, desperate for air, but the water surged around me. My mind was fading in and out, the edges of my consciousness dissolving like sand in the tide. I knew I was running out of time, that every second I spent beneath the surface meant another second closer to being pulled under completely. But then, just as my body began to give out, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Olivia. She wasn't just swimming toward me. She was fighting her way through the crushing depths. Her face pale but determined. She grabbed my arm, pulling me up, but the current was stronger now. It was as if the ocean itself was conspiring against us, trying to drag us both down into its gaping maw. I tried to push forward, to find the surface, but the creatures were closing in. I could feel them behind us, their glowing eyes watching, their hunger palpable. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them, feeling me. Their eyes were inside my head, invading my thoughts, wrapping around me like a chain. The creatures weren't just hunters. They were manipulators. They knew how to break you, how to turn you into something smaller, something weaker. They knew how to make you fear the water. And they were winning. The surface was within reach, so close I could taste the air. Could feel the salt on my lips, but something was pulling us back, dragging us deeper into the void. The waves surged, the water swirling like a vortex, pulling at our legs, our arms, trying to drown us both. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the roar of the ocean. Olivia was beside me, struggling to hold on, but the pull of the water was too strong. I could see her face, desperate, terrified. She wasn't going to make it. Not with me holding her back. Not with the weight of the ocean dragging us down. The creatures screeched, a terrifying sound that reverberated in my very chest. The water around us seemed to darken, thickening with their presence. I looked up, my heart sinking, and there, in the distance, I saw it, the creature, the massive beast from earlier. It was emerging from the depths, its glowing eyes cutting through the water like twin stars. Its form was impossibly large, A nightmare come to life. And it was heading straight for us. It was the creature that had been waiting for us. The one that had been calling us. And it was time to finish what it had started. In that moment, something snapped in me. I had nothing left to lose. I had been running from this for too long. I couldn't keep running. I pushed Olivia away, forcing her back toward the surface. Go, I screamed. Get out of here, I'll hold it off. She didn't hesitate. Her eyes locked with mine for a brief moment before she swam toward the surface. Her arms cutting through the water with frantic speed. I didn't look back. I knew this would be my final fight. The creature reached me with terrifying speed. Its claws scraping against the water like a blade. It opened its mouth, a cavernous abyss that seemed to swallow everything in its path. I raised the harpoon I had grabbed earlier and lunged toward it. My fingers numb with cold. My body screaming in protest. The creature's eyes flashed with fury. Its massive form twisting and thrashing. Its teeth bared. I thrust the harpoon forward. But it was like stabbing into stone. The creature howled, its voice a deep, guttural growl that shook the very ocean floor beneath us. The harpoon lodged deep into its chest. But it didn't stop. It pulled me closer, its massive claws wrapping around me, tightening with an almost mechanical precision. I could feel its strength, its power, pressing against me like a vice. But I wasn't finished, not yet. With one last burst of adrenaline, I kicked my legs and twisted, driving the harpoon deeper into the creature's side. It screeched again, a sound so high-pitched it shattered my eardrums. The creature jerked, its body convulsing in a desperate, final struggle. I held on tight, my vision going dark around the edges, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The ocean was closing in. Its cold, suffocating pressure threatening to pull me into the abyss with the creature. But I couldn't stop, I couldn't let it win. I pushed again, harder this time, and with a final, deafening roar, the creature let go of me, its body convulsing one last time before it disappeared beneath the waves. Taking its final breath in the silence of the ocean. I didn't know how long I floated there. The world around me was spinning. The water darkening as I lost consciousness. My body was numb, my chest burning with each shallow breath I took. The only thing I could hear was the fading echo of the creature's screech. Slowly fading into the depths. And then I heard it. Olivia's voice, weak but urgent, calling out to me, "Daniel, Daniel, can you hear me?" I couldn't respond. My body was failing me, my strength slipping away. But then, through the fog of pain and exhaustion, I felt a hand on my arm, pulling me up toward the surface. I don't know how Olivia did it. She shouldn't have been able to carry me. But somehow, she managed to pull me toward the boat. I could hear the boat's engine, faint but growing louder as we reached it. "You're not dying here, not today." Olivia's voice was fierce as she hauled me into the boat, her hands trembling as she checked me over, her eyes scanning my body for any sign of life. I could barely keep my eyes open. My body felt like it was made of lead. But I could feel the warmth of the boat beneath me, the steady hum of the engine, and Olivia's presence next to me, holding me together when I thought I had already lost everything. "We need to get out of here," Olivia said, her voice trembling with exhaustion and fear. "They'll come back. They always come back." I nodded weakly, my vision blurring. "I know, but they won't stop, not until they get what they want." The boat sped off into the dark waters, leaving the horrors of the deep behind. But I knew, deep down, that this was far from over. The creatures had only begun their hunt, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they were searching for. And I was the key. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to Whispers in the Dark. The battle is far from over, and the creatures are closing in once again. Stay with us as the truth unfolds and the war escalates. The journey began with a seemingly simple mission for a Navy SEAL named Daniel. He, along with his team, was assigned to investigate mysterious disappearances in the remote waters off the coast of California. However, What they discovered beneath the surface was far beyond their understanding. Instead of a typical rescue or recovery operation, Daniel and his team found themselves face to face with an ancient and terrifying species. Creatures that had been hidden in the depths of the ocean for millennia. As they dove deeper into the investigation, Daniel realized that the creatures were not just mindless predators but intelligent beings with a connection to his bloodline, something ancient that had been waiting for someone like him. The creatures' arrival was no coincidence. They were hunting for something. And that something was tied to Daniel. When his team was torn apart by these relentless monsters, Daniel learned a shocking truth. He was the key to their long-awaited return to the surface. The creatures had been waiting for him to open the door to a past they had long buried. A past they wanted to reclaim. Daniel's connection to them wasn't just biological. It was tied to something far older. Far more primal. Despite the overwhelming fear and pain of losing his comrades, Daniel couldn't ignore the truth. The creatures weren't just hunting him, they were after something deeper. Something buried beneath the ocean, calling to him. His confrontation with these monstrous beings wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding the ancient force that had been pulling the strings for centuries. As Daniel and Olivia, a marine biologist, continued their fight for survival, they dove into the heart of the ocean to face the source of this ancient terror. They discovered that the creatures weren't just predators. They were survivors of a long-lost race, humans who had evolved in isolation beneath the ocean. They had been waiting for the right time to emerge and reclaim their place in the world. In the end, Daniel faced the horrific reality that the ocean, the creatures, and the war they were now caught in were part of a much bigger plan. They were not just fighting for their lives but for the truths that had been hidden for centuries. As the creatures closed in, Daniel realized that he was not just an unwilling participant in their return. He was their chosen one, the key to unlocking the past and sealing the fate of humanity. Daniel's journey into the depths of the ocean wasn't just a battle against terrifying creatures. It was a battle against the unknown. It was a struggle to come to terms with the truth that had been buried for so long, a truth that connected him to something ancient. Something beyond human comprehension. The central lesson of Daniel's story is this: the truth is often far more terrifying than the lies we tell ourselves. In Daniel's case, he was forced to confront a terrifying reality that had been hidden for centuries. He was the key to something far darker than anything he could have imagined. But the moment he chose to face that truth, no matter how painful or terrifying it was, he took the first step toward reclaiming control over his fate. In life, we are often faced with situations that force us to confront uncomfortable truths. Whether it's about our own identity, our relationships, or our place in the world, the truth can be a brutal awakening. However, it is through facing the truth that we grow, that we become stronger, and that we learn to overcome the challenges that life throws at us. Just like Daniel, we may feel like we are being hunted by forces beyond our control. The truth may seem like an insurmountable challenge, and running away from it might feel like the only option. But in reality, running from the truth only makes it more powerful. The more we avoid it, the more it controls us. The moment we face it head-on, we take back our power. What Daniel teaches us is that we must confront the hidden truths in our lives. These truths may come in many forms: fears we've ignored, unresolved conflicts, or the parts of ourselves we're too afraid to accept. But just like Daniel, we must understand that these truths are not here to destroy us. They are here to challenge us to become better versions of ourselves. The more we try to avoid them, the more they control us. How can you apply this to your own life? Face your fears, just like Daniel faced the terrifying creatures. You need to face the things that scare you the most. It could be a personal fear, a challenging goal, or a difficult truth about yourself or a relationship. The longer you avoid it, the stronger that fear becomes. Take that first step, no matter how daunting it may seem. Embrace the unknown. Daniel's mission took him into uncharted waters. Both literally and figuratively, the unknown is scary, but it's also where growth happens. Embrace the uncertainty in your life, knowing that it's leading you to something greater. Sometimes, the hardest parts of our journey lead to the most rewarding discoveries. Accept the past. The creatures in the story represented an ancient past that had been forgotten. But in the end, they were tied to Daniel's own history. We all have pasts we can't change, mistakes we regret, or parts of ourselves we wish we could forget. But just like Daniel had to face his connection to the creatures, we must accept our past to move forward. Take responsibility. Daniel could have continued running from the creatures, but he didn't. He chose to face them, to fight them. In life, we often feel like we're at the mercy of our circumstances, but we always have the power to take control. Own your actions, your choices, and your future. Now, if you've made it this far, I want you to take one final step toward facing your own truth. Subscribe to Whispers in the Dark and become part of a community that isn't afraid to confront the unknown, to dive into the deep waters of what's hidden beneath the surface. Your support gives us the motivation to keep exploring these stories, to keep uncovering the truths that will shake you to your core. By subscribing, you're not just supporting the channel, you're making a commitment to face the unknown with us. Together, we'll confront the darkness and uncover the secrets that the world doesn't want you to know. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we continue our journey through the shadows. There's more waiting, more truths to be revealed, and we won't stop until we uncover them all. Stay with us. The truth is calling.